US multinational, not too far from here, just off Onkey Road in Shipley. It produces surveillance and targeting equipment, which is being sold to Israel for use in their genocidal assault on Gaza. It's astounding that 9 months on, so many people in Shipley and surrounding areas still don't know that an American weapons factory is on our doorstep. So we need to put a stop to Teledyne producing and supplying the Israeli army, as they are complicit in the genocide against the Palestinians. We need to put a stop to Teledyne profiting from the mass murder of innocent civilians. So our aim today is to raise awareness about Teledyne, to hear from experts who have knowledge as to how the arms trade works specifically in the UK, and to get your input to build up our campaign against Teledyne. So if I can introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is a Palestinian sister who's asked that we don't share her name, but she has family in Gaza and is here today to share her family's first-hand experience of what life has been like in Gaza for the last 9 months. So please do give her a very warm welcome.
My name was last on the list, so I was thinking, I'll listen to everyone. It's okay. We're all here today. Thank you for that introduction. And just a brief correction, if I may. My family live in the West Bank, but we do have loved ones who are in Gaza, who are experiencing the living nightmare that they've been living over the last 17 years. That's intensified over the last 9 months. So what I will be doing is I have 10 minutes, is that right? I will be sharing some of the stories from the experiences that I've had, some of the stories from my family, and perhaps share some insights as to why we do what we do, and why we do it. And I guess Leslie already touched on that as well. So, as Rabina said, I'm a British Palestinian. I was born here, but my father, who is from Jenin in the West Bank, was left to study. He went to study his medical degree in Jordan, and he was not able to return because the borders were closed and his citizenship or his right to re-enter Palestine was revoked. And so he ended up being stuck. He ended up meeting my mum at university in Jordan. They got married, and after 10 days of having my eldest sister, they moved to the UK. So since the 80s, so my sister was only 10 days old when she was here. And the rest of us were born and we were raised here. We were really brought up with this sense of where do we belong, and I'm sure a lot of people relate to this, that you're Palestinian but you've never been to Palestine, you weren't born in Palestine, your parents met in Jordan, so are you really Jordanian? Your passport is Jordanian, so are you Jordanian? Your passport is also British, and you were born here, so are you British? And the truth is, our identity is a mixture of all of these things. And as a teenager trying to find yourself, which everyone kind of goes through, it was probably especially difficult as a Palestinian, trying to understand, growing up in Bradford, how I fit in with everything else. And so, frequent visits to Palestine also helped reinforce our Palestinian identity. We were able to do that as only when we went to Palestine, we had to go and get a visa from Israel to enter into the West Bank. The West Bank being under international law, not recognised as Israeli territory, of course. So it was always very confusing. It was always very, a difficult kind of story to kind of grapple with and to navigate. But we kind of just went with it. We didn't really understand until later on the importance of all of this. Every time we go, the story looks like something like this. We arrive at the border between Jordan and Palestine. And we enter through the King Hussein crossing, which is also known as Emily Crossing, and we get questioned and interrogated by Israeli border police. Israeli border police will put you into a little booth, just you and them, with an armed soldier just outside, making sure that if you tried anything, the first and only response that is legitimized is to shoot you straight in the head, dead. This is acceptable, this is their policy. And the type of questions that you get asked are very interesting. So you get asked questions like, even though some of the information should already be readily available to them, what's your name, how old are you? They'll ask you things like, are you married and planning to get married and stay in Palestine or in Israel, as they would say? Are you, what do you do, where have you worked, who are the people that you worked with? What organisations have you volunteered with? Have you ever been to Afghanistan? Have you ever been to Syria? Have you ever been to all sorts of other places? And you just think, where is this all going? And you get asked some really personal questions as well. And what's going through my head in all of these questioning is, why does a foreign invader, occupier, have the right to ask me these questions and allow me entry or deny me entry to see my grandparents, to see my uncles, to see my cousins? And it's so frustrating because you know that you have to answer the way they want you to answer for you to be able to go in. Otherwise, that's your chance at seeing your family, and you may not be able to see them for another 3, 4, 5 years. Or you know, and I'm as a person, people who know me will say that I have a lot of sass. And it's so hard to just kind of contain that. It's like, no, this is not the place for it. And you want to do that. You want to say, what's it to you? A recent visit to Jerusalem, my sister was going from, trying to enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the occupation soldier asked her whether she was in a mood or not. She had a bit of a face, you know, the resting kind of face that you're not smiling, and you're not particularly happy, and you're kind of fasting, and it was in Ramadan. And she just looked at him like, you know, she looked at him, you know, as if to say, I don't have to tell you how I feel, right? And he punished her by taking her passport, confiscating her passport for a few hours until she came back and kind of said, I feel better now. It's that kind of, you know, it's infuriating because you just think, on the one hand, I want to go in and pray, so I have to play your game. But on the other hand, it really isn't anything to you how I feel, or where I'm from, or where I'm going, and who I talk to. And so it's all of these little things that maybe aren't necessarily shown or captured in a documentary or something that is not necessarily shared online. These are the kind of experiences that define our day-to-day, visiting Palestine. But when we're there, when we get through after the questioning and after hours of being held without your passports and your luggage and being searched and everything else, once we actually get through, then it's a different story altogether, because then we're faced with checkpoints. And you think, okay, I've done that part now, why do I have to do this again and again? And the checkpoints, and if anyone's been to the West Bank, you know how humiliating they can be. You know how difficult it can be to get past a checkpoint, and you may end up waiting for 3, 4 hours only to be told that you can't necessarily have to go and find a different route in. My uncle drove us from Jerusalem to Jenin one day, and he had to go through some undergrowth just to avoid the checkpoint. He had to drive and, damage some of his, one of the tires was damaged because he had to take through a route that you wouldn't know, not a non-road route, just to get you by and to make sure there was no trouble. And this is the status quo. I'm talking about a normal day, no active genocide. This is the kind of thing that you're expected to be faced with. So this is just a snapshot of the experience in the West Bank. But let's talk about Gaza for a moment. And as I said, I don't have direct family members in Gaza, but I have many loved ones and contacts in Gaza. We met here in Bradford, who were studying in Bradford and then went home to back to Gaza. And I'm in touch with them on as regular basis as their internet connection allows. And the stories that you hear, and I'm sure none of this is a surprise or a secret to anyone 9 months on, but some of the stories that you hear, you really struggle to wrap your head around. And one story that I would like to share is the story of a boy called Afia. This boy, on his 15th birthday back in 2014, he was coming home from school with his back on his shoulder. He got back to their sort of front yard, or the field that surrounded their house. And on his 15th birthday, there was no war on, there was no genocide, there was no incursion that was active at the moment. This was just a status quo. A sniper who was stationed on the fence, the perimeter fence in Gaza, spotted Afia with his bike and shot him. He shot him in the neck. Whether sadly or fortunately, the boy survived. He didn't die. But he was injured, he was paralyzed for life. He was in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. 9 months ago, on October the 8th, the second day after the beginning of the latest onslaught, Afia's family, his home, everything that he ever knew, his wheelchair, his life, at 24 years old, it was all gone. an Israeli strike, an Israeli airstrike targeted his home after having put him through the misery of 9 to 10 years of having his day-to-day, and his whole life has changed. So the 15-year-old boy coming home from school, probably thinking about on your 15th birthday, probably thinking about playing football with your friends or taking a bike ride by the beach. You're not thinking about, I'm going to live the rest of my life in a wheelchair because of a sniper that's shot me in the neck. But this was his life, his short life, and it ended on the 8th of October. And the reason that Atiyah's life ended was not because of a fault of his own. It was not because of any fault of any Palestinian. It was because of an Israeli airstrike that targeted his home. And you will find people that will say, but who started it? What caused this to happen? We need to be able to point the fingers of accountability in the right direction. You cannot say to somebody who is wearing a short skirt that it's your fault that you were raped. You cannot say and excuse everyone for the actions that they chose to do. They still chose to do those actions. You cannot say to Atiyah, 15-year-old Atiyah, it was your fault you were shot in the neck. You cannot say to Atiyah and his family, it was your fault and your people's fault that your house was bombed. That bomb fell after the command and the execution of the command by the Israeli occupation forces. We need to be very clear about accountability here. And that's something that is missed in a lot of, I think, the dialogue, especially when you go online and you have a look at some of the comments that you see and the blame that is being thrown around. And I'll tell you a story. You think, where did that missile come from? Where did that bomb, that targeted attack, that was so the precision of that bomb to target their house, where did it come from? It could have come from a factory that's just down the road from us. That's the harrowing thing about this story, is that that bomb that took away the life of Atiyah and everyone in his family, the people that had lost their lives that day, 2-year-old, 5-year-old, 7-year-old, his parents, his grandparents, a whole generation, multi-generational, because of a bomb that was essentially manufactured just down the road from us, in our city. And then you sit here as a Palestinian and you think, how could I have stopped this? How could I have done something that I have the privilege of living here and the duty to do something here? And what is my duty? And what is it that we do? And this is touching on the things that both Ravina and Leslie mentioned. We have every duty and every responsibility to do something because we have the power to do that. That's Atiyah's story, and it's one of many. One of at least 38,584 people. I'm going to say that number again. 38,584 people with names, with dreams, with families, with hopes, with friends, people who have ceased to be. They literally no longer exist and will never return to this world. 38,584 people accounted for. That doesn't include the people under the rubble. That doesn't include the people who are missing. That doesn't include the people who are taken away from day one or throughout the Israeli incursion to locations unknown. Their own families don't know anything about them. They don't know where they're being kept. They don't know if they're still alive. They don't know what conditions they're being kept in. Of those 38,584 people are at least 15,000 children. The school I went to had 500 children. 500 children in my school that I went to in Bradford. That school and another school, that's 1,000. 30 schools of mine, of the size of my school, were wiped out. That's how many children we've got. When you say 15,000, it's just a number. When you try and contextualize it, what does that mean to me? 15,000 children. It's not a small number, and it's every one of those innocent children's lives was cruelly taken away. And that's just the people who've lost their lives. And perhaps in Palestine, what they say is those who are martyred are the fortunate ones. They're the lucky ones, because they no longer have to suffer. Their suffering has ended. You have over 88,000 people who are injured in a place where the healthcare system has collapsed. And when we say collapsed, it means that access to healthcare is difficult. There are no beds. There are no safe places, no medication. Anything that does come in gets used up very quickly by the people who need it the most. Doctors have to, and I come from a medical background, doctors have to prioritise based on what lives they can save and what's worth saving. What lives are worth saving. Those who are in the green, it's okay. You've lost a leg, it's fine, you'll survive. Those who are in the red, can't do anything for you. Those in the amber, that's where we work. And those in the amber, we're not talking about 2 or 3 people that you've got to prioritise, talking about hundreds of people in one go. So a strike that kills 10 people leaves behind 100 injured people. And these are the people, as I said, Palestinians will say those people who are martyred are the lucky ones because their suffering is ended. The people who are left behind, they're the ones who we have to worry about. And there's more than 10,000 people who are missing. In the West Bank, where, as you know, the Hamas group is not in power, and so any excuses of what Hamas don't work. Just this year alone, or just since the 9 months ago, 575 Palestinians have been killed, including 140. These numbers pale next to the 38,000, but if you think about it, again, at my school, 500 people in my school, all of them wiped out in the West Bank. More than 5,300 people were injured. This is all just since then. Last year, 2023, was the deadliest year in the West Bank for Palestinians. These are Palestinians that are going about their daily lives, going to work, going to school, going to university, getting married. Talking earlier to Najm, and I was saying about my cousin whose wedding was not Friday gone, Friday before, in Jenin, in the West Bank. The day of her wedding, the occupation troops were in Jenin, were in the street where the wedding venue was. And the 2 families, they sprung each other, so my family's in the village, and the in-laws will be in the main city, Jenin. Obviously access is very difficult, transport is very difficult. The decision was, let's call it off and try and find another day. There's no way we can get that. 2 hours, just 2 hours before the wedding, and if you know anything about weddings, and if you've ever been organising a wedding, 2 hours is nowhere near enough time to get ready for a wedding. 2 hours before the wedding, the Israeli troops withdrew from Jenin. Picked up the phone and said, shall we put it back on? Shall we go for it? Let's go for it. The wedding happened and she got married. But the point is, your day-to-day life is affected. It's not just a case of surviving bombs, surviving injuries. It's a case of, can I go to school today or can I not? Am I risking my life simply by going to school today? Am I going to survive the checkpoint? Am I going to be able to get my children safe? Am I going to be able to feed my children? And we're talking about the West Bank. The occupied territories recognized as Palestinian territories, and Israeli presence in those territories is illegal under international law. Not that Israel ever responded or respected international law, of course. And this is all people. This is people who are killed, people who are injured, people's lives are affected. What about infrastructure? What about buildings? What about hospitals? What about the homes that have been destroyed? You know, I like a quiet day at home. That's my kind of ideal evening. And every time I'm sat there and it's nice and quiet, and I just think, what if I didn't have this place to come back to at the end of the day? What if I didn't have the comfort of my own home? The heating on, or a window open, the running tap water, the electricity. What if I didn't have all of this? More than half of Gaza's homes have been destroyed. That means even if this ends today and people were able to go wherever they wanted to, half of the people in Gaza do not have their home to return to. And do you think at the end of this, Israel will say, here go reparations, every home that we destroyed, we're going to rebuild for you? They're going to take no such responsibility. 80% of commercial facilities, that means the way people make money, their businesses, their livelihoods, 80% of those buildings have been destroyed. And if that wasn't enough, we're targeting the infrastructure that will cause a growth in our communities, that will cause education, knowledge, that will be the beacon of hope. They were targeted. Schools, universities. There was a Islamic University of Gaza that was detonated in such a cruel way, and was filmed and it was paraded as such a victory by Israel. And I just think, suppose you went into that place and you found the targets that you wanted to find, and you eliminated them as you call just in a justified way, which of course is not. What is the point of destroying a building after you've left it? What is the point of detonating this building, this beacon of knowledge and hope for the future? Why would you detonate it? 88% of schools and all universities in Gaza have been completely destroyed. 65% of road networks and places of worship have been destroyed. I'm going to quickly end with this. I know that there are other speakers that would like to listen to as well today. And that is, we know the reality, we know the statistics. Much of what I said to you today is probably not news to you. You're probably aware of all of it. You're following on the social media and on the news outlets that are worth following. None of this BBC Sky News nonsense, of course, I hope. But the Palestinians, what they want to see and what they hope from the world is more. We sometimes go to a protest and pat ourselves on the back that we've done something. And I don't want to belittle any of that hard work that anyone does, and I think it's amazing. And I think that giving up your weekend for the last 7 or 8 or 9 months is actually really admirable. To come together, to demand that our governments do better, it's very important. But we Palestinians, we're people of faith. We believe in the divine. The Muslims, the Christians, we come together and we believe in the hand of God. So our hope is in Him, ultimately. But we know, just as the time of the Islamic calendar right now, if anyone's not aware, is the time that commemorates Moses crossing the sea and hitting the sea with a staff and parting the sea parting. In that story, we learn that when Moses hit the sea with his staff, a small little body of water, what was he going to do? It was the hand of God that enabled his victory. But he had to do something. He had to strike the water. And that's what we're doing. We're doing that little something in the hope that, as people of faith, we hope that God will elevate our actions and our deeds, and He will cause the victory for those who are oppressed. And our victory isn't just the ending of the war. It's not just a ceasefire. And this is the message that I want you all to go home with. Ceasefire is not enough. After ceasefire, it's rebuild Gaza, end the occupation, end the siege, end the apartheid state that is built upon the stolen lands of Palestinians, and establishment of the state of Palestine from the river to the sea.